Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. I'm Melinda Sampson, the Community Outreach Coordinator for NC Stop Human Trafficking. And today we're talking about the Victim-Offender Duality. And what does that mean? I mean, simply put, it means when a victim of human trafficking subsequently becomes an offender in the judicial system. And this issue is tricky for many reasons and can be kind of hard to absorb, especially when you're thinking about accountability. As a society, it comforts us to judge harshly those people who are accused of a crime. In human trafficking, it becomes incredibly easy to see. It becomes incredibly easy to do that in human trafficking cases, and to see these cases with no hint of nuance. Justice is served when a trafficker goes to prison, right? But in far too many cases, the justice system sees a trafficker, but it's actually a victim. And that's what I'm going to unpack for you today. So what happens when the victim is charged with trafficking? You know, what happens when they are then convicted and sentenced to prison? What happens when the trafficking victim is implicated in another crime that is directly caused by their trafficking? Where is the justice when a victim is again arrested for their own victimization, relegated to a life with no good choices? Our justice system isn't equipped to handle the nuance of this issue, frankly. And it has proven systematically to fail victims, providing no actual justice for survivors. It's not set up to help survivors of human trafficking. In many ways, it is set up to arrest and convict without much flexibility and little nuance. And that's what the justice system is doing right now. I'm talking to you with the voice of an advocate for survivors and victims. So this is where when we see victims arrested and going to prison, we see a problem that needs to be corrected. Survivors of sex trafficking are being charged, tried, and convicted on human trafficking charges. For instance, when a trafficker, a pimp, madam, what have you, requires their victims to post photos online of other victims, or acquire sex buyers or clients for other victims, if they're required to recruit other victims, or even give other victims a ride to a hotel. Under strict adherence to the action means purpose model, or the AMP model, that outlines the crime of human trafficking. They can be charged, tried, and convicted of human trafficking. So what I'm saying is the victim themselves can be charged and tried for human trafficking. And let us make no mistake about this. Victims are absolutely spending time in jail and prisons on these charges. In a study of the sexual exploitation of girls in the United States, the role of female pimps, it analyzed the cases of 49 female offenders on a federal, state, and local levels, and included plea agreements and sentencing for them. So they have been convicted. According to this report, only 7 alone, and 20 had male co-defendants. And in that study, those male co-defendants were also described as violent and abusive. The study includes 5 different types, classifications of female traffickers, which includes bottoms, which we're trying to move away from that language, but in the study they are called bottoms, guerrilla, family, a madam, or business partner, and then handlers. And it is important to note that not a single handler or bottom acted alone in this case, in this study. It's also important to know, because the handler and the handlers or the bottoms, victim offenders, are typically controlled by a pimp or another trafficker. According to this study, they're serving time, and they are serving time or have served time in the federal and state prisons, based on this study. Of all the females who were sentenced on trafficking charges, 20% were also trafficked as minors. And there's also a coverage about sex trafficking victims across the country who've been arrested for crimes committed while they were being trafficked to their trafficking. So notably, we're gonna talk about Zeffie Trevino right now, who is 16 and is currently in jail and being tried as an adult for the murder of a sex buyer in Texas. It's important to say that she isn't the one who actually killed the sex buyer. It was her trafficker who pulled the trigger or shot the person. She was simply in the room when it happened. Understanding the nature of trafficking, you know that victims are never away from their traffickers. So the fact that she's even being tried as an adult, and advocates had fought incredibly hard to prevent that from happening, but she's being tried as an adult thus far. The fact that she's still in jail is problematic at best. That's the best language we could use for that one. Her attorney said Zeffie's case is a common fact pattern, and she's locked in a grisly, grim battle for her freedom. Now she's 16. And so then we can move on to Crystal Kaiser, who he may have heard about as well. She was 16 years old when she was initially abused by her trafficker. And she was actually recently released from jail. She had an astronomically high bond. But she is being tried for murder of the person who had abused her, the trafficker. She maintains that she was defending herself at the time, and the courts are still trying her for premeditated murder. So there's something to keep a lookout on that one. And then, of course, Cyntoia Brown was recently released from prison after serving 15 years in prison, after she was sentenced for the murder of the sex buyer. And though these names are known due to a lot of advocates coming out and saying, you know, let's not convict these women, let's get them out of jail, let's get them out of prison, because those are inherently harmful already after all the harm they've endured. Media coverage and the media coverage and the gravity of their charges, really. There are countless human trafficking victims languishing in jails and prisons for crimes they did not commit or had no other choice. And that is just the fact across the country. They are being arrested for burglary, drugs, robbery, assaults, and not to mention other human trafficking charges to boot. So we need to look at the nuances of these cases, frankly, in the justice system when we're talking about prosecution and accountability. In a qualitative study from victim to victimizers, which is interviews about 25 ex-pimps in the Chicago area, 50% of the female pimps were coerced into pimping to begin with, and 57% entered pimping at the request of their boyfriends. Now, I want you to know that I'm using the language of the study itself. One woman in the study said, "I didn't want to, but it was my job to take over and get his money. He told me he would have me taken care of or injured if I didn't continue to take care of his business and stable." And a stable is the term traffickers use for their household or the people they're controlling. So many survivors become victimizers because of the abuse they endured, and becoming controlling was seen as an exit ramp to their already violent, to a less violent life. So if the trafficker didn't coerce them, becoming a trafficker themselves was the only exit ramp they could see to a less violent life. In that same study I mentioned, 88% of the pimps interviewed experienced physical abuse as a child, 76% experienced childhood sexual abuse, with an average age of the first childhood sexual abuse assault at 9 years old. 48% ran away from home due to physical and sexual abuse in the home. And while we believe that people who do harm deserve accountability, absolutely, and victims deserve justice, we need to look at how we are meeting that justice out, and that is the point. Advocates can agree that the justice system is deeply flawed. Frankly, across the country, the justice system as a whole is failing survivors of human trafficking. If survivors are going to jail and fear coming forward because they fear going to jail or going to prison, that's where you know that it's failing. Rebecca Bender, an advocate and survivor and founder of the Rebecca Bender Initiative, said it best. She said, "We have to talk about the way in which the justice system has failed. Not only people of color, but survivors. It is not a system that is designed or equipped to create true justice. In many ways, the only thing the justice system In many ways, the only thing the justice system, as it operates now and through the lens of many survivor perspectives, deters victims from coming forward, and that's an issue on its own. So they're not seeking help or justice for themselves. Actionable steps, and I know I've talked a lot about the issues, but there are actionable steps that we can take that can ensure less survivors who go into the harmful system, less survivors go into jail and prisons, because that is harmful and re-traumatizing, and they don't deserve that. So we need more specialized investigations. When I say specialized investigations, I mean investigations through the lens of human trafficking specifically, not just stings. More training to better determine culpability in an investigation. So more training to determine who is the bad actor in the situation and who is being compelled. And a trauma-informed training for law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges. And all of this training should be applied to prosecutors, law enforcement, and judges, because if you don't know what you don't know. If you're going out and you're enforcing the law, then you're enforcing the law by the letter of the law, and flexibility is important. And if law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges are equipped to understand trauma, understand victimization, then there is room for flexibility. We must look at more flexibility to these laws. I mean, and we have to look at mandatory sentencing as well. And while more training can start to disrupt the victim to prison pipeline, it's also important to make clear that there is no amount of training that can rid the justice system of racism, misogyny, and misogynoir, which is often at the forefront of many cases where trafficking victims are being prosecuted. So my point is, we can train, and that would be perfect, that would be great, but at the end of the day, we also need to look at the society in which we are living and shift that. It also must be recognized that people who do harm must be held accountable. I'm not saying that people who do harm should not be held accountable, but it is time to look at how the U.S. holds harm doers accountable. The justice system is harmful, and while traffickers are arrested, those laws and punishments are also sweeping up victims too. And so the solution to this issue is as complex as the problem itself, frankly, because we do want traffickers and sex buyers to be held accountable, but we also don't want victims to be re-victimized by the system that's set up to protect them. So with that, if you guys have any questions, of course this is going to stay up like every week, but if you guys have any questions, please put them in the comment box and we will answer those questions I'll answer those questions as I see them. If you want more information or to go more in depth, I posted the link to our blog, which is about the Victim-Offender Duality, in the description of this live, or you can check out the newsletter, which is an abridged version of this talk. And the newsletter also includes trainings coming up from our organization and organizations across the state. Thank you so much for your time, and again, please put all your questions in the comments below, and I will. Thanks.